Hi, I'm Carrie,
And I'm Molly.
and you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
So we're back. We took a little break because we've been backpacking and traveling and backpacking and driving and backpacking and driving. And in between that, you also have to rest a little bit and prep for your next trip. So we decided that we were just going to take a few weeks off, but we're back again just in time for school. Anyway, today we're going to talk about a trip that actually...
I have to say, I didn't like the month of August in the past when I was a student because August was always back to school month. Back to school. Actually, I swear things like stores roll out back to school in June?
No. July 5th.
Oh, July 5th. That's right. A transition of holidays.
Because going back to school is a holiday.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Woohoo. However, once I didn't have to go to school anymore and I moved to the Pacific Northwest, I realized that August is like a golden month of the year. Probably my favorite month. So interesting how the turntables.
It is interesting. So today we're going to talk about a trip that we went on that actually has not been on our Instagram at all, not on our Facebook or socials at all. Not for any other, well, it's on our Stravas, I guess. Not because it wasn't amazing, because it was, but because honestly we've just been busy. Yeah. And sometimes, I feel like the trips that we take don't often make it onto our Instagram in the moment. They often migrate on there as the winter months approach us, as the time of darkness comes. Anyway, so this trip that we went on was one that we've been eyeballing for years, I'd say, maybe 4 or 5 years, probably.
For you?
Yeah. For how long for you?
For me, 2 years, because I learned about it 2 years ago.
Sometimes I like to keep things secret from Molly so that she doesn't have to eyeball them for as many years as me. But it's interesting because I think that we were a little intimidated because it's billed as being a little bit of a scramble, a little bit of a route find feel for the second half of it. And so I think I was a little intimidated by it before, but this year I just feel like we built up so many skills with scrambling, route finding,
Well, remember when we did the trail around Mount St. Helens, Carrie, I didn't really research it. So she was the one who was holding off on it because of the goalies and how those were kind of intimidating to her. And so then we did the Lewitt Loop, and then we went up and down all those goalies, and we were like, well, we can just do anything now.
And I still feel that way. I feel like that really beat the fear of exposure out of me.
It unburdened you.
It did. So I feel I don't know if in the future what I'm going to have to do is go there and just do that as my first trail of the season so that I'm mildly traumatized by all of the steep goalies with very loose rock. And then I'll just be able to do anything because it's every time I go somewhere now and I'm ooh, it's a little bit, sheer. I'm well, at least I'm not walking on just a bunch of rocks that fall, where if I put up my hand to touch one of the rocks, the rock above me might fall on me because it's literally not attached to the mountain by anything except the loosest, chossiest rocks in the world. Yeah. So today, you've probably been whoa, I'm getting so excited to find out where they're going. We're going to talk about the backpacking trip that we did to Tuck and Robin Lakes. So this is in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, which is an area that's about 2.5 hours from Seattle, 3 hours or so. And I think the Alpine Lakes Wilderness would be best known for the Enchantments, which is a really, really beautiful area with just granite and alpine lakes and some glaciers and little baby goats, and in the fall the larches turn gold, and so it's so popular. It's really beautiful. A ton of people do it as a day hike. Yeah. It's 26 miles and it's 21 miles, 20 miles. It's the mileage varies based on what I say to you. You could do add-ons probably, but it is about 20 miles with a ton of elevation gain. So it is a serious hike. And we actually have done it 3 or 4 times, 5 times. We've done it a bunch of times. And we'll probably talk about that at some other point. But the point being, a ton of people go there. And it's kind of interesting because I feel the other areas in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness haven't gotten quite as much attention until more recently, when a lot of those lakes have been featured on Instagram. And so I feel we kind of were going back and forth, oh, should we even talk about this backpacking trip or not? Because it's in a higher use area. But at the end of the day, people are going to go because people are going to find it on Instagram, regardless of whether we share it or not. And we would like to just share like a few of our tips throughout this episode on kind of how to maybe lower your impact on this area or spread out your usage. Especially because, again, that Trail Through the Enchantments is so popular that going to this, trail is kind of a way to lessen some of the use of the enchantments area. And as we discovered later on, there's actually a ton of really cool trails in this area. There's a ton of lakes. And it does have like some pretty intense feeling features to it, like scrambling or a little bit of route finding. So you kind of can thin out the herd, quote unquote, I suppose, if you would like to go here, but just kind of, you need to be very aware of your impact in this area.
And I'd have to look at a map specifically, but the Alpine Lakes Wilderness is fairly large. Like, I think you can access lakes that belong in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness by going on Highway 2 and then going south. We access this trailhead by going on I-90 and then north through Cle Elum. So that whole section, I mean, it's a large area. And like Carrie said, even going there to go to Tuck and Robin, we saw a lot of trailheads that, they would employ pretty intense trails as far as like vert that you gain. Not as many cars are parked there, so they're lower use. And really, you could just like explore the Alpine Lakes Wilderness itself for years and years and not even see everything. So there's lots of cool options, and, Tuck and Robin is absolutely beautiful, and if you can go there, I would say go there. It's amazing, but I think that there's also things that are equally beautiful to be found that can really provide a lot of solitude. So, I mean, we dipped our toes in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, obviously with the enchantments, and then doing Jade Lake a couple years back, which we can talk about a little bit later, but when we actually did that hike to Jade Lake, we had a recommendation by someone who was hiking that we should go to Robin Lakes, and we were like, well, we can't do everything today, so it's kind of been on the radar and something we've wanted to do for a while, and it really did not disappoint. It was a very, very fun trip.
So one of the ways that we like to kind of decrease our impact on trails, especially in Washington, is to go to them not on Saturday. A lot of people in Washington seem to recreate only on Saturday, or if they're going backpacking, they'll go Saturday, Sunday. And I understand that that's because people work and they have jobs and all that kind of stuff. But if you go to an area to like backpack on a Saturday in Washington, I think you just need to understand if you're choosing a trail that's at all popular, you're going to have a lot of neighbors. You might have competition for sites. You probably need to get there early, and you might not have the solitude that you're looking for. There's this quote that I really love that says, you can't expect solitude to be where you want it to be. You have to go where it is. And sometimes I like to even tweak it to say you have to go when it is. And so if you're looking at backpacking at a popular area, I would honestly just say maybe try to plan in advance and take like a Wednesday, Thursday off of work. I know that's not possible for everyone all the time, but like I would say if you're looking for weekend backpacking, maybe try to choose places that are less popular, less remote, like less incredible, I mean, they're still beautiful. Yeah, more remote. Yeah. And I don't know what I said, but just because those are some of the ways that you can lessen your impact, because when there's like 200 people camping at a lake, obviously it's harder to find like durable surfaces. It's harder for, everyone to find a good spot to go to the bathroom. But if you can go on a weeknight, it's going to be a lot better.
And even like when we were spending some time in Washington, I had Mondays off. And so it made a really good Sunday, Monday itinerary. And a Sunday night can work really well. So even if you can't take 2 days off of work, even just taking one day off and it's like Friday, Saturday is not great. That's very busy as well. So if you can get it's in Washington, right? Recreating outdoors is very popular. So anything around a weekend is going to be busy, but the Sunday, Monday seems to be surprisingly nice when it came to just not as crowded. So we arrived at the trailhead, I want to say around 11 a.m. We had a longer drive to get there. So we got there on a Sunday morning, and it was pretty wild because there were cars that were parked probably almost a half mile away from the trailhead along the forest road. And we were able to get a a parking spot that was, pretty close. We always target where the pit toilet is and park close to that because we know we need to use it. So we were able to park pretty close to the pit toilet, and that was all fine. And there was just like a lot of groups coming out around that 11 a.m. time frame on a Sunday. So a lot of people had been doing that Saturday, Sunday bit that worked for them. So we got there. Something that we found is because the Alpine Lakes Wilderness is on the eastern side of the Cascades, it does tend to be hotter. So especially, oh yes, and it's in a valley. So, one time we went on a hike, and when we were coming down from the mountains, it was in the 90s. It was very hot. This day, fortunately, I think the highs were in the 80s, but definitely being aware of the fact that, an early start is favorable for you, and you spend multiple miles hiking at a lower elevation before you start to climb. And even once you start to climb, it takes a while. We were actually blessed with a really windy day, so that helped to cool us off too. But just being aware of, okay, temperatures are important, and like looking at the forecast. For us, we couldn't get there any earlier just because we had a long drive, but that's something to factor in.
One thing that was kind of funny about the drive to this trailhead is you do a little creek crossing. So you actually have to take your whatever vehicle you're driving over this little creek that runs across the road. I feel like most cars could probably make it through most of the time, but obviously we were in the Jeep, so it was like a teeny tiny little crossing for us. So I feel like that's one of those things that we noticed when we first came to this trailhead, and we noticed again because it's just kind of cute and kind of fun. It makes you feel like you're doing something kind of cool. So when we arrived there, it was interesting because it's Sunday and it's about 11 a.m. and you could see that a ton of cars had already left. Like
we probably met 40 cars just on the forest road heading in, and they were heading out.
Yeah, and so it kind of felt like such a total win because you could see that people had parked way away from the trailhead. They'd been parked all over, and it's funny because like when they parked there, obviously it made sense, but when you're driving in on a Sunday morning and a ton of people have left, it's like, wow, look at all those weird random empty spots. So we pulled in, we got all of our stuff situated, we found our bug spray, which is a crucial piece of your backpacking gear in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness in July. And we got our bug head nets out, and we finally loaded up all our stuff, and we were ready to go. And honestly, it felt really nice because we'd been carrying our mountaineering gear on a lot of our recent trips because we'd been doing mountaineering objectives. And so when you take away your rope, which weighs 5 pounds, when you take away your crampons, your boots, your helmet, your crevasse rescue rack, your ice axe. It's just like you have shed so much weight, and not only weight, but like awkward bulk that kind of dangles from time to time. And so even though our packs were still like kind of heavy, it's more heavy than walking around with no pack on, it just felt so good to get rid of and get started. And so we started up this trail, and it's kind of funny because the beginning portion of this trail is like this meadow where the grass and like the flowers and plants are all taller than you. And so you kind of can't see very much. And there was this dog that ran up to greet us, and we were kind of like, oh, okay, like, hello. Like, Molly and I love dogs. Dogs are great. But sometimes when you have a dog run up to you and there's no other people around on a trail, it's like becomes kind of awkward because you're like, where's the owners of this dog? And so we, said hello to the dog and kind of kept walking, and it was following us. And then we saw this other couple coming out of like the opposite way, like they were leaving, and we were like, great. And then the dog that was by us like runs to go be like, greeting them. And we were like, oh, that's nice. Like there's its owners. And they're like, oh, what a cute dog. And we were like, that's like a weird thing to say when you're the owner of the dog. And we're like, yeah, he is cute. And they're, he's kind of licking them. And
they're like, is it okay if we pet your dog?
And we were like, that's not our dog. And fortunately, they were kind enough to say like, well, we're leaving, so we'll see if we can find the owners. But I was like, what an awkward position to find yourself in, where suddenly you're like, do I need to like stop this hike that I just started and I've driven hours for to find the owner? Like, is their owner farther up the trail and it's just gone away from them? So I don't actually know what happened with that dog. We think maybe there were a couple people getting ready in the parking lot, so maybe their dog was just running around. But anyway, I don't know. That was just like a weird little aside.
This is a crazy realization. I didn't realize this, but I think that the trailhead we started at, the name of the trail we used to access Robin Lakes is Deception Pass Trail.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And we had that recommended to us this summer. Someone was like, Deception Pass is so beautiful. And we were like, we don't know where that is. but we've been there maybe.
Oh my goodness, that's actually really funny. They recommended to us like multiple times, and we were like, "Oh, we'll have to look it up." But it was like we've actually been on that trail 2 times. It's part of the PCT. That's the interesting thing, right? Like the PCT runs through here, so there's so many trails you can explore. So as we started hiking, we're kind of just getting into our groove. We've gone like maybe a half mile, maybe not. All of a sudden, we just hear this like crack. Like it sounds like a tree is falling over. And it was like right above us. I could hear it. And I feel like we were just like, I don't know if I just yelled like run or if you yelled it too.
Well, like in the corner of my eye, I saw like limbs falling around us, and Carrie yells, "Run!" And she was in front of me, and I remember just like putting my hand on her back, and we just started running down the trail, and I saw another like limb fall, and then
one fell like on my left side, and you saw one fall on your right side. And it's crazy because like you don't know how big the tree is or where it's gonna fall, and in that moment you don't want to be like, let me look up and see where it's gonna land, and I'll just decide which way to run then. Like it was kind of weird because who knew if you were running into where the tree was falling or out of it. So we ran for kind of a little while. I feel like we sprinted harder than we've ever sprinted in our packs before, and luckily no tree fell on us, but it was just kind of like a funny, not funny, weird way to start the day.
Well, we were like, we've hiked for thousands of miles, hundreds of hours, and I don't think I've ever heard a tree fall anywhere in proximity to me. And so yeah, we were like weird, and then continued on.
And so then we just kept on hiking. There were a ton of groups that were headed out, I felt like. A couple people that we saw that were headed in. But yeah, you just kind of have to make your way along that trail. It's hot. There's not a ton of breeze, although it was more breezy than normal because it was a super windy day, probably why that part of that tree fell down.
And then about 2 miles in, you get to Highest Lake, which is, we think it is glacially colored. And so it's just this really beautiful lake that's on the floor of this valley between the peaks that the Alpine lakes are situated in. And so it's just a fun lake to walk beside because you get to have little peekaboo views of it for probably another mile and a half or so. And really, like if you're looking for just like a first time backpacking trip that's very chill, you can get to the lake in about 3 miles with negligible elevation gain and enjoy it like a crystal clear, cold alpine lake. So we talked about how we've wanted to swim in this lake before, and we wanted to swim again, but we had places to go. But it'd be a really fun place to like take a floaty and just float.
And actually, that's one thing that I will say. I feel like probably someone who just pulled up to the trailhead on a Saturday would be like, this area needs to be permitted. This area needs to be permitted. There's so many cars. But we saw a bunch of people camping at Highest Lake. There were people camping. Like, this is a kind of a springboard area to a ton of different areas in the Alpine Lakes wilderness. So just because you pull up to a trailhead and see a ton of cars, maybe you'll see a good chunk of people on trail, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is already going where you're planning to be. One nice thing about this trail is that when you get about 4 miles in, there's this perfectly situated little waterfall where you like have just started going uphill, so you're getting kind of extra hot. And then you step into like this oasis, right? We always love to talk about nature's AC, which is wind and water. And when they're combined together, it's like heavenly. So you kind of finally step into this one cool spot on this hot trail, and we spent probably half an hour there refilling our water.
We realized that we hadn't eaten lunch, so we started the hike at like 11:40 a.m. and now we've been walking for an hour and 20 minutes or so, and it's well past lunchtime. And we looked at each other and we're like, well, why wouldn't we like eat? Why do we want to just get hungry later on? So yeah, we really enjoyed just soaking up the cool air, and we didn't have a super long day of hiking. There was a decent amount of elevation for us to gain, but it was just a really nice little resting spot. And as soon as we stopped, the mosquitoes really started to descend. So we kind of broke down and did use our bug spray, which I feel like it's like always this battle for me. Like, well, how long can I go without using it? But we did use it, and then just really had a nice relaxing time at the waterfall.
Yep. And so then when you're done with that, you have a little bit more climbing that you do till you get to the spot where the trail splits. And it's kind of funny because the last time we were on this trail, I thought to myself, oh, I wish I was going to Tuck and Robin Lakes because their trail goes down and our trail goes up. And so this time I got to go on the trail that goes down for about 50 feet. And then it just does go up as well.
Which is funny because we saw this couple hiking before we got to that junction, and we just said hi to them, and the gal was like, and just so that you know, you will have to do a river crossing, but you can do it. It'll look scary and it'll be about like thigh deep, but you can do it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was continuing to look for the river crossing the entire time, but apparently it was on a different trail than the one that we were on because I never encountered a river crossing.
Which I will say, I love that lady was so positive and so encouraging. And I think she even said, like, everyone makes it sound so scary, but I know that you guys will be fine and you can do it. And I was like, yes, someone encouraging out there in the wild, just like seeing other gals out there hiking and just encouraging them. And I feel like we haven't talked about that in a little while, but I always think back to our John Muir Trail experience, how it makes such a big difference, trying to either surround yourself with people who are positive or trying to be that positive person when you meet people on trail. And so I thought that was kind of like a fun example of someone who is just like really cool and really ready to support other people on trail and not scare them and not scare them.
Yeah. And at this point then we really only had just a little bit around 2 miles left of hiking to do, but we had a little over 2,000 feet of elevation. So our first kind of segment in our uphill journey would be going from the low point where we kind of went downhill for 50 feet, like Carrie mentioned, and then would start to ascend up to Tuck Lake, which was about 1,100 feet of elevation higher than us in about a mile. So a fairly steep trail.
Which, by the way, I feel like there were portions of this trail where it went up and down and up and down and up and down. So maybe, do you think we gained a little more than 1,100 feet? I don't know. Maybe. But yes, that trail was kind of fun though, because even though it's like physically sort of challenging, it's dry, it's hot, it's sandy, there's not a ton of shade, but you are getting into the breeze, and then it's like every step that you go, the views are just opening up. And it was super cool because we could see what we believe was the backside of Mount Daniel and the glacier on the backside of that. And it was cool because from low down, it looks nice. But then as you get higher, you start to be able to see this waterfall. And then as you get higher, you realize it's twin waterfalls just pouring off of the glacier, which then was fun to compare the next day, like the amount that they were pouring off the glacier at whatever time this was, like 2 p.m. versus how it was pouring off the glacier at, like, let's say 11. And so it was kind of just like fun to be able to, I don't know, I think we really took our time because we knew it was hot. And even though like internally you're a little bit worried about the time and how it's going to just get hotter the longer it takes you, it's also like, well, we only have 2 miles to go and it's relatively early in the day.
And it was really interesting too, because we just did admire that glacier on Mount Daniel. Like as it got a little later and it was sunny and hot, the glacier was basically just like glistening. Like it looked like it was actually sweating. Like the snow just looked incredibly full of water. And then of course the increased volume coming out of the waterfalls. And then pretty soon as we continued to climb, we're actually above those waterfalls that we had been admiring. So there was no real technical difficulty to this part of the trail. I mean, there were some areas with some loose gravel and it did get steep. At this point, the crazy thing is, right, a pretty popular area, but we probably only met maybe 3 or 4 groups of people coming down during our time going up. And those people were like 2 to 4 people in the group max. So really it didn't seem like a ton of people had been up there. And I would think that just that area being a little bit higher would take a little bit longer to leave, unless you're just like leaving at 6 a.m., which I like to enjoy the area a little bit more than that.
And I'm going to be honest, I think that there's probably fewer people because although this is a really beautiful lake, there's one other lake in the area that is on Instagram a lot, and it looks really cool on Instagram. And it looks cool in real life too. But I think that the draw to that area is that lake, and then people don't bother learning about the many other really stunning lakes in the area. So it was funny because we planned to take a nice little rest break when we got to Tuck Lake. We're like, we're going to refill our waters. We're going to swim. Yes, you love to hear that from us, I'm sure. We're going to swim. We're going to swim. We're going to like just really enjoy Tuck Lake. So we kind of finally pop up towards the lake, and it's nice because it's like shady again. There's trees in that area. And it's just like clouds of mosquitoes close to the lake. So we were like, well, that looks cool, but we're going to not do that. So kind of immediately we were transitioning towards our climb for Robin Lakes. And you have to go all the way around Tuck Lake. And the interesting thing about this area is there are a ton of social trails. So it's kind of like a little bit tricky to determine which trail is actually the most direct trail to get, towards your climb for Robin. And we actually ended up getting a little bit off track. We instead of going like on this little piece of land that separates Tuck Lake from Tuck's Pot, which is just like a little tiny, I guess it would also be a lake, but it's just kind of like that part of the outlet for Tuck Lake. We ended up going around Tuck's Pot, which...
Well, we saw these two guys and they were like crossing over that way, and we're like, well, that must be where we go. So we like had to climb down to cross this little stream through all this vegetation and clouds of bugs. And then we climbed back up on the other side of Tuck's Pot, and we saw a route like through a boulder field that definitely looked like it would go. You could climb it. But then when we like double checked on our GPS navigation, it was like there was technically maybe a social trail there, but the like actual trail was further over. And so then it was a little silly because we had just spent probably a good 20 or 30 minutes like kind of bushwhacking around, and then we were even further from the trail than ever before as far as our desired route up there.
Yeah, so we kind of had to bushwhack our way back over and across, which...
Like, actually, like, trying to force your body through, like, pretty dense brush, but it did keep the bugs off, being just, like, totally covered in bushes that were just covering... I don't know.
Yeah. And we did take, like, 5 minutes by Tuck's Pot to just get a little more water and rest, but I feel like we were just like, let's just get back to where the trail is.
I think I saw a fish in there.
Wow. That's amazing.
Our most recent trip to the Wind River Range, there were fish everywhere all the time, but it was a little bit exciting to see a fish swimming around. So yes, we fought our way through bushes, and then we finally and then we were on all these social trails, and it was like a dead end with a cliff, and then we backtracked some more, and then there was a log jam, and we didn't do that, and then we finally did. I think we found a cairn, and we're like, okay, we're finally on the other, like, kind of unmaintained trail up to Robin Lake. So it's interesting because this trail now, we had about 0.9 of a mile and about 1,000 feet of elevation to gain to get up to Robin Lakes. So a similar kind of profile in elevation gain as the previous one, but this trail, instead of being an actual pathway, is a little bit more of just a kind of fun scramble with cairns to guide you along as you climb above Tuck Lake, and then you continue on into a world of granite up to Robin.
Personally, I didn't find the scrambles here to be anything that was too extreme. There's a couple spots where maybe you have to drop down like 3 feet, and maybe I looked pretty awkward going down it on the way down, but there was like plenty of little handholds or footholds or maybe a root here or there that was just perfectly placed to go up. But it did take time. Like, it took longer than I thought it would. It took longer than I wanted it to. And I do remember at one point as we're going up, this lady was coming down, one of the few groups that we saw, and she had a floaty on her back, which we thought was very fun. Yeah. And she was like, guys, keep going. You're almost there. And, like, it's so nice when people are encouraging, but when technically, compared to the entire trail, yes, we were closer to being there. But we still had probably a 0.8 of a mile to go at the point she said that to us. And so I feel like I was always like, maybe we're close, like maybe we're almost there, and then we kept not being anywhere even remotely near being there.
Which in reality, it took us an hour, so that's not very long.
I wanted it to be shorter.
I really enjoyed it though. Yeah. Like, it was kind of fun. Like, it was this mixture of like kind of easy walking on granite, and then occasionally you'd use a hand to kind of scramble up something. There was never any real exposure that was concerning, so it was all very just like tame and safe, and it's not as fast as just blazing up a trail, but it was so fun, and we were just delighted to reacquaint ourselves with granite because of the sturdy footing that it supplies. So it was just like so fun because you'd be walking on rocks that are like a little bit angled steeply, but just feeling every step being super firm and secure in your footing was just a lot of fun, and we just enjoy having good footing. And so you kind of have to decide, there's like, once again, cairns mark different routes. There's not just one route. So you really just have to feel comfortable, going towards a point and trying not to get like stuck on a part of a route that maybe doesn't go, but just kind of continuing to pick your way through. And so then we got to one section where there was 2 snowfields. And so this area Honestly, like, I think it was just like a week before we had done Ruth Mountain, and I was like a little bit concerned about post-holing through snow because that route was a lot on snow. And I had read that someone had like, I don't know, I think they were on Baker, and like when they were descending back to the trailhead early season, they like post-holed and like messed up their ankle on a rock. And I was like, well, I'm afraid of that happening to me. And so then, of course, on this trip on Ruth Mountain, we're like walking along and I post-holed to my waist. Like, it was crazy. So, here we are, 3 p.m., walking across some snowfields over boulder fields. And so definitely we were like, okay, we don't want a post-hole here. And we didn't have any issues with it. But something to be thinking about when you're traveling on a trail with a lot of snow in early season is just trying to, I don't even know how to prevent it really, but earlier starts will prevent you from having a lot of that. And it's crazy because there's a lot of snow in Washington in June, and we had looked into going on this trail like maybe 3 weeks earlier, but there was a lot of snow fields that people had been commenting on, and really the reason I didn't want to go that early was because of the post-hole factor. So pretty amazing to see how so much snow could melt in only a couple of weeks to where snow became just a non-issue for us.
On one of those sections, it was kind of fun because we met a father-daughter combo who were doing it as a day hike, which I thought was pretty intense. I mean, it probably would only be like 14, 15 miles as a day hike, but as hot as it was and as long as it is, I was like, kudos to you guys. And so
it was cute. The dad was like, yeah, my daughter, her friends like decided they didn't want to go hiking. And so at 5 a.m. she woke me up and asked me to go. And I said, of course I'll do that. It was really cute.
I thought that was really sweet. So finally, you kind of have your last push up to Robin, which I would say becomes a lot more like of sort of like low angle granite versus the scramble that you're kind of doing. And as you kind of go up there, you just kind of have this push and everything is beautiful. Everything is laid out beneath you and just so stunning. And then finally you're there.
Yeah, it was incredible. We were getting close to topping out before you have to descend a little towards the lake because, of course, you always have to descend to get to the lakes. But like the closer we were getting, the more it opened up. And Carrie had been telling me like there's not a lot of trees up there. Like it's a lot of granite. It's like the Sierras. And I was just like, what? That's crazy. And we were getting above tree line and all we were seeing was just really just like rocky features. And it was one of those, I mean, I'd never even seen maybe I'd seen a picture of it, but not really one that I could recall too well. So it was one of those just genuine feelings of excitement. Like, what am I about to see? This is so cool. And so we topped out, and it was just beautiful. It's just this perfect sparkling lake. There's I think there's 2 main lakes for Robin Lakes, and all around it is granite outcroppings, some steep cliffs, and it's really just like, it's not forested. It's just like beautiful granite and then meadows. And as we started to even just descend into the basin where the lakes are located, we saw maybe, I don't know, like 3 adult goats and some babies. And we were just like, oh my gosh, how fun is that? Just like pretty excited to see where we might find a spot to pitch our tent. And the group that was coming down, the one that told us we were almost there when we were, an hour away from the lake, they had said that there was only maybe one other group up there at the time. So we were pretty excited to have a lot of options, hopefully, for where we wanted to pitch our tent.
Mm-hmm. And it was just fun to see in person, even as someone who sort of knew what it would look like, because I feel like pictures are also limited. Like, it just can't show the expansiveness of it, like the sparkliness of the lakes and the fun feeling of like the goats playing in the background. So we had 2 choices. Should we set up our camp right away to make sure we got a decent campsite, or should we go swimming? And for once in our lives, we actually chose to swim.
And I feel like the issue, so once again, we didn't swim at Tuck Lake because it was just like a lot of bugs, and honestly the like entry point to the lake didn't even look all that attractive to us. So just, continued on. But anyways, one of our fatal flaws is we don't swim first. We do camp stuff. And then you don't want to swim because it's evening and the sun is low and it's like cold or the mosquitoes are coming out. So then you can't even dry off. But yes, we did make the decision to swim first and we did not regret it. And let me tell you, that water was ice cold in the back drop of where we chose to swim, which was a really nice sandy beach. There's actually an entire snowfield just melting into the lake. And so I've swam in some very cold water, and that was up there in terms of like chilliness. And so really, I don't know, I'm not strong enough to just like dive into the water most of the time, with the exception of a few times. So I just do the wading method where it takes a decent 5 minutes to just like slowly wade in, and you have to like scream a little bit every time you submerge a little bit more of your body until you're at the point where it's like, well, I'm like shoulders deep, so I might as well swim. But yeah, it was a really fun swim. And very good because once you got, mostly submerged, then the mosquitoes weren't following you in and would leave you alone. So that was really cool.
And one thing that was super fun was that we could watch the goats like play from the lake. So it felt like I was watching Nat Geo, like it was like a National Geographic Channel show. The little goat was like following its mama everywhere. And it was kind of cute because it couldn't get over the rock at one point. It was just like, meh, meh. And finally it had to find a different way around because it couldn't do the little goat hop that its mama did.
Well, we liked it though, because I think that the mom she deliberately chose to kind of take it on a little cliffy path, and then the little goat was supposed to follow, and then it was too afraid and it tried like 4 times and it was like, I can't do it, mom. So it just went a different route and was fine. And then
like, go around.
And then, like, maybe 2 minutes later, the goats reemerged and they, like, hopped across the little outlet to the lake that we were in. So we just really enjoyed watching the little goat family they just traverse across that entire basin probably every day. But yeah, we were right in the right position for their little show they were putting on, and that was really fun.
Mm-hmm. So once we were done watching that, we decided to get out of the lake and we were like, we're just going to dry off on shore. Well, the mosquitoes had found us and it was a very windy spot. So then it was kind of funny because we just like grabbed our backpacks.
Well, first of all, we would do the old trick. I don't know if you've done this before, but it seems like mosquitoes, they maybe don't find you for the first 2 minutes that you're somewhere. And then if you move far enough away, it takes them a minute or two to find you again, if you're lucky. So at first we just started we would sit on the granite in one spot and then we would just walk 50 feet over and stand, but then the mosquitoes were really wisening to our plan. So then, like Carrie said, we were like, well, we gotta pack up and go somewhere else.
Which now I like to adjust my quote to be for mosquitoes. You can't go where your delicious feast for where you want your delicious feast for human blood to be. You have to go where it is, the mosquitoes. Anyway, so we kind of just popped on our packs, even though we hadn't even dried out yet. So we didn't bother putting back on all our hiking outfit. And we wandered around until we found out where we wanted to camp. And there was this beautiful, granite, rock, bluff almost type of area that we were able to find. There was a spot where it was a super durable surface because it's granite. So we were able to find an area to set up our tent. It
had shelter of several trees, and then it was even kind of dirt right by the trees, so we could even pitch our tent without having to use rocks or anything.
Yeah, so we found that perfect little spot, and then we kind of got all of our food out and figured out, well, we thought we'd have a snack, and I am a person who hangs on to my backpacking and hiking snacks. So we had this little Nutella and pretzel snack that I've kept for 4 years because we ate it a bunch and then we stopped eating it.
And I found it in our food bag, and I was like, Carrie, we are only staying out for one night, so we can bring fun stuff. Let's bring these Nutella pretzels.
And I think was it that the Nutella had gone bad, or was it mostly the pretzel sticks? The pretzel sticks, they
were rancid.
They were literally rancid. But for some reason, you didn't mention that to me until you were already opening yours and eating it. And
I don't know. I was like, well, maybe it's fine.
Yeah, and so I opened mine too and started eating it, and I was like, what is this poison? So then, of course, you have to pack out everything that you bring in, food, snacks, and all. And so I did not eat it, but I certainly did put it back in our bear canister and say, you're coming out with me, buddy. You're coming out with me. So I'd say probably if you're going to commit to bringing like a 4-year-old snack, maybe you should check and make sure that it's not rancid first.
And it's not the only thing that we had rancid to eat this season. I don't remember when we found out about the other rancid item, but we'll tell you about it in the future.
Yeah. So it was really cool though, because even though, there were all those cars at the trailhead and so many people were out there, it seemed, we actually were one of only 3 groups, right, that we saw out there this night. And I actually am going to do a side thing, and people are probably going to think that I don't like dogs. I do like dogs. I just don't like dogs that are like out of control in the wilderness. And so there were people who brought their dogs with them, which that's fine. They're allowed in that area. And I don't think you specifically have to leash your dogs. However, there are goats in that area. That is like where they live. That's their home. They're always there. And there was this part of the evening where I don't know if the goats got a little too close to camp or what, but this dog was just like chasing the goats all over. And I don't know, it's just really upsetting because it's not safe for the dog to be unleashed in that scenario because it's chasing goats and goats can gore them. And it's not safe for the goats either. And I just feel like in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness and in Washington, they've had issues with goat-human like interactions where somebody got gored by a goat gored to death by a goat, like in the Olympic National Park. And they had to spend all this money like relocating them and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of this is my little soapbox, which is like, if you want to unleash your dog, that's fine. But if there's animals around, like, you need to either have a dog that listens to you, because they had to call that dog back for like 5 minutes. It would not come when they called. Like, if your dog cannot control itself and come right back to you immediately for its safety and for your safety and for the safety of future dogs and people there, you guys should probably leash your dogs just to take care of that. So I'm sorry if that offends you, but it's for your dog's safety and for your safety and the goat's safety and the next dog that comes, because maybe it won't, maybe it'll run away from your dog, but eventually it might choose to not run away from the next dog. So that's my little soapbox. Other than that, we had just an awesome evening there. We watched the sunset. The mosquitoes kind of waxed and waned in their intensity. We certainly did eat dinner with our head nets on. And we just really enjoyed our time there. Like, it was picture perfect. Other than like the weird dog goat interactions, it was mostly pretty quiet. We could see the other group fishing, which I always think is super fun. And we did have to chase the goat off from our food a couple times. We basically always had our food in the bear can there because...
And I don't even think the goat was approaching our food. It was just getting close to our campsite, but we felt like we didn't need it to be like exploring anything.
I think we mentioned this probably before, but goats are attracted to salt. And so if you're going to backpack or camp in a place where goats are, you need to make sure that you're peeing far away from your camp, because when you pee, you have salt in your pee. Goats love that salt. They're waiting for that precious offering from the human. They're like, OMG. Like, we've camped at some places where like the second you're done peeing, the goats are like standing 10, 20 feet away. Like, are you done?
I'm ready for that.
Are you done yet? Are you done yet?
And then precious offering from the humans.
Get it while it's hot. They like fresh off the press. They like can barely wait for you to leave, and then they have to go. So that's another thing. You're supposed to like pee on durable surfaces as well, because if you pee on like softer dirt, they will go nuts. They will dig and dig and dig and dig.
They will be digging a hole to the core of the earth and chasing that sweet urine.
They literally sweet salty urine. They like go bananas over it. So if you're camping in Goatland, do not pee. Like, even if it's the middle of the night and you're like, oh, I just want to get out and pee close to my tent. No, because I read a review of someone who did that one time, and they were like, so we were just like up all night trying to defend our tent from all the like dozens of goats that were like, I need your pee. So anyway, that was an aside, but don't do that. But I really wanted to make sure that the goat was not associating our campsite in any way with our pee, or we did have salty snacks.
And honestly, in that case, you sweat on your gear, and it's probably a bit salty too. Delicious. So it was a absolutely amazing looking goat. Like sometimes you see goats early season and they're still shedding and they're like wearing half of their winter coat, and it's like it just is a little bit fun. It's like silly looking. But this goat was like all clean, no shag, like this muscular goat like strutting around, and we were like, please stay away from our campsite. So it did, but we had to keep a bit of an eye out for it, just so that it didn't start to try to live among us.
But once we were done with that, it was kind of just time to bundle ourselves in bed and escape the mosquitoes in a more permanent way by getting inside of my tent and turn out our headlamp and enjoy our night. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
We're so glad to be back, and we hope that you can't wait to tune in to hear our second part on Tuck and Robin Lakes. Bye!